Okay,
Okay.
that was a little loud, I think.
It was.
Okay, welcome everybody to Office Hours. It's December 21st, and I'm Joanna Katzman. I think Carla Thornton is not here today. I just wanted to let everybody know it's really good to see you. We had a great session last week talking about the new Pfizer vaccine, and really appreciate Dr. Sosa, Dr. Hayes, and Dr. Sievers being on and giving such great updates. Just wanted to let everybody know that if you have a camera and it's on, fantastic. If you don't and you can put it on, please do so. It really is in line with the Echo model, and we can see you, and it aligns with better teaching. Also, our fantastic digital librarian Kent Noseworthy is on, and he's always ready and always putting evidence-guided and evidence-based information from our speakers and our subject matter experts into the chat, which you can copy and paste and put into your browser and take with you right away. And finally, please don't hesitate to put any questions. I see some already coming in, to put any questions that you have into the chat, because we have eliminated the pre-registration questions, and I really want to get your questions covered as soon as possible. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Sosa, Dr. Nestor Sosa. Nestor's our Chief of Infectious Disease at University of New Mexico School of Medicine, and we're so happy to have us having him lead us. So thank you, Nestor.
Thank you, Joanna. Thank you very much. Let me get my slides on the screen. 1 second. Okay, I have prepared actually 2 sets of slides, one with the latest article, and if there are a lot of questions on the Mrna vaccine, I also have a few slides with information from the Mrna vaccine, but I'll leave it for the end after the discussion, out of respect for the other experts who are here in the panel. So I already saw a question on the new strain or new variant from the UK, so I decided to start with that. And there are a few communications already, scientific communications about this, on top of everything that has been discussed in the lay press. So this is one of those high headlines that really scary headlines that I saw over the weekend. The Secretary of Health of England saying that COVID-19 is out of control and there's this new strain. So what do we know about it? Before I go into that, I'm just going to give a brief overview on how these mutations are identified, because you're going to see people throwing letters at you with the N501 mutation, which is very important, blah, blah, blah. So I want to just a quick review. This is sort of a biochemistry thing. So the proteins are made of amino acids. So there are a lot of amino acids that can make a protein, and they are identified either by the 3-letter code, like alanine is ALA, but they also have a letter. So in order to sort of to get an abbreviated change in the proteins, the way the scientists refer to these changes in protein is they mention the new the original amino acid in the protein, in which position the change has occurred, and the name of the new amino acid. So in this case, there was asparagine here, and was substituted in position 501 by Y, which is basically tyrosine or tyrosine. So that's essentially what these numbers, and you're going to see these numbers. And there are others, like when there's deletions or insertions, they are slightly different, but that give you a general idea. So what is this new strain? First of all, it was detected in September, so it's not completely new. Started, the scientists in the UK and many other countries, they actually doing genome sequencing of the virus, circulating to see what type of mutations. And we know the RNA virus do mutate, so they have changes here and there. But then all of a sudden, like it happened a few months ago with the D6614 mutation, this new strain seems to be seems to be becoming more frequent in the UK, and it's already reported in other places in Europe. So they actually noticed that this new variant, which they're calling either BUI 2020-1201 or B117, it's so complicated. Also, people refer to it as N501Y because this is like a dominant mutation in the receptor binding domain. Actually, this new variant has between 17 and 23 mutations. So it's really a pretty mutated spike protein from the virus. And some of the mutations are important. The 501, the one that sometimes gives the name, it's in the receptor binding domain. So this is the area where actually the protein attaches to the ACE2 receptor. So any changes there obviously need to be studied carefully. And there's also another important site in the other side of the protein, the sort of the furin cleavage site, and there's a mutation there. So that may have some translation into changes in the behavior of the virus. It may have occurred, and this is a speculation, because the virus is circulating in human population, we're using convalescent plasma, so it may be this accumulation of mutation may be actually a mechanism of the virus escaping the immune attack of from serum, plasma, or antibody use. There have already been more than 3,000 isolation of these virus with these mutations, and it's actually, according to a source, very frequent. 62% of the recent strain from London have this mutation. And there's this is also speculation, they feel, because it's becoming so prevalent that it's also transmits more rapidly or more readily. But to be honest, I think we know that the mutation is there. We know that it's becoming abundant or frequent, but I think all of the other concerns are still theoretical. We need to confirm that in fact is transmitted with experiments in ferrets or other animals to see if transmission is or in cells to see that it transmits more readily. We have to see the clinical course to see if it's more severe or less severe. There's no reports of that. It's too early yet. We need to also see, and there's another concern, do the vaccines also cover this strain? Well, we have to take serum from people who have been vaccinated and see if that serum neutralizes the virus, this strain. We haven't seen that. They're probably running to do these experiments in the UK as we speak, but we haven't seen any publication or pre-publication. Though the monoclonal antibodies like bamlanimab works against this, we don't know. We have to do the experiments, and the experiments have to be peer reviewed and published. So I think there's many questions. I wouldn't really be too concerned, although the World Health Organization and some governments are already restricting travel from the UK. The UK went into a lockdown because, it's the careful and the right thing to do until you get all these questions answered. Because if all the questions, the answer is a wrong answer, the vaccine doesn't work, the monoclonals do not work, then you need to find alternatives. So in the meantime, the good thing is to try to prevent the transmission. So that's all I'm going to say, but it's so, and if you see in the illustration, I skip that, but it has a deletion, so it had lost part, these two amino acid position 69 and 70, which is actually in an important area of the virus, and this is the receptor binding domain. It has several highlighted in red, several mutations in this area, which is the area where the virus attaches to the ACE2. So you can speculate that those changes maybe alter the behavior of the virus as a whole and it could make it more efficient to infect cells. We just don't know. We have to wait for that. Okay, let's move on. And these are all the changes. It has many mutations. This is a list of the mutation. I already mentioned the N501, the one that it's in the active site, but there are many others. So that's important. And people are looking for these mutations in the virus that they're isolating. There's another interesting paper out of Korea. I'm always impressed by these studies done in Japan, Korea, and in China about contact tracing, because they do have like a very sophisticated way to do contact tracing. And the story goes, the investigators in Korea found 3 young adults with SARS-CoV-2 with infection, and they couldn't find who infected them. So they actually use an app that actually evaluates where you have been in the days before your infection, so they can actually track, geographically where have you been. And they actually, during this investigation, they found that these 3 persons, not related, not family, they didn't know each other, had been in a restaurant at the same time, the same day. So then they went ahead and looked at the closed circuit TV of that restaurant, and they actually were able to establish where these persons were in the restaurant. And they found that one person that we call the infector is case B. Case B infected these 2 other persons that were detected through this contact tracing. One person, interestingly enough, was 6.5 meters away from infector B, and only 5 minutes in the restaurant without a mask. So they coincided only for 5 minutes in the restaurant. The other were coincided in the restaurant, or were together in the restaurant or at the same time for 21 minutes, but he was also 4.8. So, it was kind of unusual, these long distances. I mean, they were unmasked. So when they look at the distribution, they found this is case B. This is the blueprint of the restaurant. Yellow are the tables. The chairs around the table. You can see there are 4 chairs around each table. The infector that we're calling infector, Mr. B, Mr. B was here, and Mr. C and A, the 2 persons that became infected from this person, were 4.8 and 6.5 meters away. And what they discover is that the air movement, and they study the air movement in the restaurant. The stream from the ceiling air conditioning moved like this, as you see the arrow. It bounced against the wall here, and then it goes straight into these 2 persons. So only those 2 persons became infected. All of these other persons that were in the restaurant did not become infected. So this highlights, 1, the possibility of transmission in a longer distance. Number 2, the importance of air circulation in a room. Obviously, this person D, who was in front of B, also got infected. This was his, the person that went to eat with this person B. He also got infected, but then that B infected these 2 that were relatively far away. So I think it's an elegant experiment that combined, the closed circuit TV, airflow dynamics in the restaurant, and obviously the contact tracing app that was able to put this person in the same place at the same time, using this technology. Okay, regarding therapeutics, there's a new drug that has been studied for COVID. This was part of the NIH ACT study. In fact, it was the ACT 2, and it's called baricitinib, which is it's a Janus kinase inhibitor. And I just want to show you quickly the results of the study. Baricitinib, the Janus kinase, it's really an intracellular enzyme that helps the inflammation. So it's sort of pro-inflammatory. So in many rheumatologic diseases, you can use this inhibitor of the Janus kinase and decreases the inflammatory cytokine production. It may also have some antiviral effect and also increases the lymphocytes. So the investigator at the NIH decided to treat the patients with remdesivir, which is sort of the standard of care for hospitalized patients with hypoxemia, and they added baricitinib to one of the arms. And actually, the baricitinib was given every day, 4 milligrams for 14 days, with the remdesivir for less than 10 days or up to 10 days. They actually did this double-blind randomized, in which one arm received remdesivir, baricitinib, and we did this study at UNM. We were one of the sites. Dr. Harkins was the principal investigator. So one arm had remdesivir, baricitinib, the other one remdesivir alone. They enrolled over 1,000 patients. And what they found, the main result was actually a shortening in 1 day of the recovery. The endpoint was time to recovery, and they found 7 days with the remdesivir, baricitinib versus 8 days. So 1 day short, not a big finding, but at least 1 day recovery. Although when they look at patients in what they call the level 6, which are patients basically on high flow nasal cannula or non-invasive ventilation. So these are patients who are sicker than the regular patients that come and are receiving oxygen by just a nasal cannula. They are in high flow or non-invasive, but they're not intubated or in ECMO. So that's that group. In that group particularly, they found a larger difference, 10 days recovery versus 18 days with remdesivir alone. So it shortened the recovery by 8 days, the combination of remdesivir, baricitinib, and there was also a trend towards lower mortality. The 28-day mortality was 5.1 for the combination, 7.9 from the remdesivir, but it crosses 1, so it was not statistically significant. So I think a lot of places, hospitals, um, Infectious Disease Society of America are analyzing these results and thinking and considering the addition of baricitinib. I would say, if anything, for patients who have this more severe disease with high flow nasal cannula and non-invasive ventilation. This is the graph that we have seen, this similar graph. You can see how baricitinib recovery tended to be better than placebo almost throughout the whole period of follow-up. Okay, and then this is more an epidemiological study, which I found very interesting, and answers the question in part, the question of what happens if we let the virus run unmitigated. And this had happened in some places in Latin America. For instance, Peru, people are studying the prevalence in Peru, and it's over 50%. In some areas, also in some areas of Mexico, it's over 50% of the population have already been infected. So these scientists actually did a study in Brazil, in 2 cities in Brazil. They did in Manaus, which is in the Amazon. It's a 2 million inhabitant city in the center of the Amazon, and Sao Paulo, which is one of the largest cities in the world. And you can see they used some modeling, and they actually tested donors in blood banks and donors in these 2 different cities. And you can see that according to them, close to 75% of the people that lives in Manaus, Brazil, have already been infected by October of this year. So, and you can see this is the curve in gray. You can see the curve, how high it went, number of cases per day, and then it went down. But it probably went down because of herd immunity, actually, because a lot of people had already been infected, according to the calculation. Obviously, much less in Sao Paulo, which is they did a different intervention. Here, the epidemic was basically left unmitigated. There was no significant contact tracing because of lack of resources. So the epidemic really became very widespread. Here, it was much more controlled, and nevertheless, they have close to 25, 29% positivity. So interesting epidemiological paper. And finally, I think Dr. Hertzman, I don't know if he's here, but he asked me to review this paper, which I have already seen. And you remember that early in the epidemic, people were speculating that maybe if you get something like, if you get MMR vaccine, or if you get BCG, the tuberculosis vaccination, it may help indirectly protect you against COVID-19. Well, these authors actually did a study. I'm going to show you the study. They did a study in which they took 80 people, and they divided the 80 people in 50 and 30. 50 were younger folks who presumably had received or had evidence in their medical history of reception of MMR2, so the current MMR vaccine. And then the other 30 were older folks who were not vaccinated or had natural infection. And they actually measured the levels of antibodies in both groups, and they found that those who had a high level of antibodies against mumps, which is not really similar to COVID, but this was the finding. So patients who had a high mumps titer, not measles, not rubella, which are the 2 other viruses in the vaccine, but exclusively mumps, there was a clear-cut correlation between high antibodies and protection. So people with very high level were basically functionally immune, meaning that they have been exposed, very close exposure to SARS-CoV-2 and no infection, or they became infected but were symptomatic if their level was 1.1, 0.3, and so on. The lower the level of antibodies against mumps, the higher the severity of the disease. So it's obviously an association. It needs to be corroborated by other studies, but it's interesting that if you have antibodies against mumps, which has not been reported before, you seem to be protected. So there you go. So the logical thing would be to do actually MMR vaccination and prospectively evaluate that intervention. But I think probably now with the vaccines coming down the line, it's probably not a big issue, but it's interesting nevertheless, this finding. And finally, I'm not going to do any vaccine study today, but I just want to, for those who because I get a lot of questions in other sessions that I do, how do mRNA vaccine work? I found this illustration very simple. So the mRNA vaccines are actually messenger RNA encoded in a lipid nanoparticle, and this is done, number one, to protect the mRNA from lysis when it's entered into the human body once it's injected, and second, because the lipid code helps the mRNA enters the cell. It produces what we call a transfection of the cell, and then the mRNA gets into the cytosol, into the cytoplasm of the cell, and then it's translated into the proteins that, in this case, all of the mRNA vaccine that we have so far encode for the spike protein. And then the spike protein is either released and it stimulates production of antibody, or it's actually presented to the cells using the major histocompatibility complex. Is presented to CD4 cells and CD8 cells, and they recognize either the parts of the spike protein or the whole spike protein, and then there's an immune response, cellular and humoral immune response. So this is the way. So injecting mRNA becomes protein. Protein is partially digested, presented to the immune system as foreign, and then there is a reaction or production of antibodies and cellular immunity, and that's what confers the protection that we have seen. Recommended reading, I found actually JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association, review the most viewed articles. So if you can go into the JAMA webpage and look at these, they have many articles, but one really struck me. It's an editorial or a viewpoint from Dr. Berbrick. We have heard about like the social determinants of health, and he elaborates on moral determinants of health. So really very interesting, very engaging reading of these papers. So I highly recommend it. It's not related to COVID directly. It's just direct, related to health in general and what he calls the moral determinants of health. And finally, don't forget, today is the great conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter in the sky. This is a photo I took in my patio a couple of days ago. So the two planets are going to be very close in the sky. So I really invite you to do it. This hasn't happened since the year 1226. So it's been more than 800 years since these two planets have looked so close in the sky. So please, tonight, look at the sky for a minute and look for this. It's usually very close to the horizon, looking west. You're going to see it, probably below the moon. The moon is higher up. And finally, I'd like to thank everybody who's been in this ECHO. Thank you really for helping me work through this pandemic, keeping me interested, motivated, and sharing knowledge and learning from you guys. And thank you for the ECHO project to give me this opportunity. I just wanted to give everybody happy holidays. Thanks. I'm going to start sharing here.
Dr. Sosa, I think we all want to thank you so much. Really, I really want to thank you for helping me personally get through the pandemic. You've been really a life source, and I think a source for all of New Mexico. So thank you so much. Really, thank you for your amazing teaching, and wish you a happy new year. Want to move on to, don't forget to continue to put in your great questions, and wanted to move on to Dr. Leslie Hayes, who's also been so instrumental. Leslie Hayes is a family medicine physician and an addiction medicine physician in Española with El Centro Family Health.
All right, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, so for those of you who weren't here last week, I asked the providers in my organization and also on a COVID group on Facebook what they had learned from the pandemic that they were going to continue to use afterwards. And the answers I got were just so interesting. So I just am sharing them. So a lot of people talked about the things they were going to learn about infection control. And given how much controversy there is nationwide, I was really surprised. Healthcare workers, there was no question. Everybody was just like, masks are great. We're going to keep wearing masks. So people talk they're going to wear masks during flu season, possibly for the rest of their career all the time. And then everybody should be wearing a mask when we have URI symptoms. Kids should wear a mask in school during flu and cold season. Children can be more resilient than we think. They can wear masks all day at school, while some adults can't wear one at the grocery store. And people are talking about they just happily and blindly ran into rooms in emergency medicine. And I've always amazed we wear masks for the kids for RSV, but when they were in the emergency room, nobody masked for them. So, but another comment was, I touch my eyes way too much, and to avoid hospital break rooms. Handshakes can go away forever. Blowing out birthday candles. This one actually makes me sad. I love birthday cakes. I love birthday candles, and I didn't even think about it till people started talking about it, but really it's kind of gross to blow all over a cake and then eat it. Schools are incubators of disease. Take children out of schools, infectious diseases in children practically disappear. And some of the practices, such as hand washing before eating, that people always said, oh, we can't possibly implement it. Maybe we can do them in the post-COVID world. I love this one. I recognized that my estimation of a 20-second hand wash was actually much shorter than an actual timed 20-second hand wash. I never realized how many times I licked my fingers in life, turning pages, opening up plastic produce bags, etc. It's kind of disgusting in retrospect. I still haven't figured out how to properly open the plastic produce bags. It's taking me an extra 15 minutes at the grocery store to open them without licking my fingers. Handshakes, time to do away with them. I cringe when I think of how little I used to clean my stethoscope. Also, the whole cleaning the stethoscope thing, when those Santa wipes are out, it's so easy. When you have to hunt them down, it's much harder. And at the very least, get rid of ties. Meetings, there were a lot of disagreement on meetings. Many people were of the opinion we should never have an in-person meeting again. It's much easier to have visiting professor presentations virtually because you don't have to pay for travel. Zoom family meetups are a nice way to connect with people. There should be a lot less meeting. It should go through email, and meetings should make decisions. Information should go through email. And then other people were like, I really miss in-person meetings more than anything. It's too easy to get distracted with Zoom. I love Zoom meetings. I can just, pause in the middle of my rounds and then go back and finish seeing patients. I remember everybody's names, and there's no travel to cities I don't love visiting. I definitely think this is true. Somebody commented that every meeting should at least have a Zoom option, and then people deciding whether or not to have their videos on or off. The weekly department meeting is much better attended now. People talked about conferences and annual assemblies being virtual. Not perfect, and you miss out on some stuff if it's not in person, but it's really much more convenient. You can play the sessions back, and you don't miss sessions because they overlap, and your money goes a lot further. And then one comment that all board certifying agencies should just give all of the physicians and physician assistants and nurse practitioners maintenance of certification credit for this year, because we've all spent so much time learning so many different things. And then some Zoom meeting disadvantages. There's no boundaries for work-life balances. So many 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. meetings. And then somebody said just, it made her sad that people didn't want visitors or in-person meetings to continue. And so much of the humanity in medicine is that personal connection. And then there were some interesting comments about visitors. And many people were saying they actually wanted to continue to limit visitors even after the pandemic. Maybe not a popular view, but it's nice not having spouses present at OV visits. The office runs much more efficiently without guests or kids. So nice not to have arguing parents, grandparents, and sibs in the room. No parents coming back to the OR to put the kid to sleep. The kids do so much better without them. It is much easier to take care of patients with a single family member in the room rather than fighting my way through a crowd. Without extra visitors, I can ask personal questions about safety and trauma without asking the parent or partner to leave. And I think it's definitely something worth looking at, of, putting limits on visitors. I know when I was in the hospital, I found I slept much, much more than I did whenever I had visitors, and I could focus on recovery. So, but this comment I think was really, really important. No one should ever be made to die alone in a pandemic. And I'm going to go through one more thing here. Self-care. Taking time off when you're sick does not make you weak. A lot of people commented there's no reason to wear anything but scrubs to work ever again. The importance of self-care at allowing people grace during difficult times. And somebody commented that now that we're working from home so much, it's often hard to ask for time off because it's just too easy to call in remotely. A lot of people talking about biking to work to avoid public transportation. And then never take any opportunity to see loved ones for granted. Before COVID, I almost didn't go to a friend's birthday party, and they just had to go. Didn't know it would be the last time they could hug or see her. Same with visiting long distance relatives. No more, I can just go next year. And this was my absolute favorite comment. How about women physicians still look great, even without makeup, dress clothes, or high heels? So And I'll go through the rest of them next week or 2 weeks.
Thank you, Dr. Hayes. Fantastic. And just a reminder that Dr. Hayes also said, yes, we're not going to meet next week, but we will meet the first Monday in January. Thank you, Dr. Hayes. Super, super interesting comments. I think a lot of us can relate to many of those. And let's turn it over to Marla Sievers from New Mexico Department of Health. I know you've been really busy and have some updates possibly on the Mrna vaccine.
Yeah, thank you, Joanna. Just wanted to share a couple of updates about the approved or the EUA authorized Mrna vaccine. A couple of differences I'll just highlight from the Pfizer vaccine. I think one of the most important being is that it doesn't require the ultra low cold storage. So makes it a little easier for distribution. And so our first shipments of the Mrna vaccine will be arriving in New Mexico this week. And that initial allotment, the state of New Mexico has earmarked for our long-term care facilities. So our initial Mrna allotment will be earmarked for residents and staff in both nursing homes and licensed assisted living facilities. And that vaccine distribution will happen through the federal pharmacy partnership with Walgreens, CVS, and a local pharmacy group called Vita Pharmacy. So we're looking forward to getting those vaccines distributed in long-term care facilities. As you know, they've been really disproportionately hit with not only cases among their residents and staff, but deaths as well. So hopeful that this is a positive sign for long-term care. The Mrna vaccine is approved for use in people 18 years and older. So you remember the Pfizer vaccine is approved for use in people age 16 and older. So change there or a difference. And the Mrna vaccine, the second dose is administered 4 weeks later. For the Pfizer vaccine, it's 21 days. For Mrna, 4 weeks. On Moderna's site, they say 1 month. The CDC site says 4 weeks. Hopefully they'll get a little more precise about that time period, because I can already imagine all of the questions is, does that mean 28 days, 30 days, 31 days? So hopefully they tighten that up a little bit to just cut down on the confusion. Many things about the vaccine are the same. They're also recommending that the vaccine not be co-administered with other vaccines and that you wait at least 14 days before or after receiving another vaccine. The Mrna vaccine is in a multi-dose vial that contains 10 doses. It's not diluted, unlike the Pfizer vaccine. And same recommendations for vaccinating pregnant and lactating people, people with immune compromise. I think that was my only update for today. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Marla. We so appreciate your coming on. We know how incredibly busy you are, and you do so on your own time, and we're so appreciative. I think we have Carissa Culbreth on too, and I just wanted to introduce Carissa Culbreth as one of the medical directors from Tricor Lab. Carissa, are you there?
Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. And I'm not sure you have any updates, but just want everyone to know that you're here if there's any questions about the laboratory testing or anything else that Carissa's on today. Thank you. Great. Well, let me start some questions. I think I might, well, I'm looking for the first question. I think I might ask Nestor or Marla the first question, and that I think there's either, maybe there's not controversy, but I think there is a difference in the two vaccines, and that the Mrna trials have shown that there is some protection or lack of once patients are vaccinated with the Mrna vaccine, they're unable to kind of spread the virus to others, that there's kind of no shedding or there's no ability to spread, but that hasn't been the case, is my understanding, with Pfizer just yet. Can you kind of clarify that for me or for us?
Yes, I can. I can at least give some comments. Yeah, that's correct. I mean, Pfizer did not mention anything about infection prevention. There was one table in the document that Moderna sent to the FDA, in which they actually mentioned that before dose number 2, so patients got their first dose, and when they went for the second dose, they did a swab, and they found 14 patients or 14 subjects with a positive PCR in the vaccine arm versus 38 positive PCR in the placebo, meaning that there were more asymptomatic infections, much more in the placebo than in the vaccine. So the conclusion or the analysis of that data means that at least it confers some protection. And when you calculate vaccine efficacy in that very limited information is around 66%. So there's around 60 to 70% prevention of asymptomatic infection, but this is very limited. It's just one swab in day, vaccine day number 2 or vaccination day number 2. What Pfizer mentioned in their paper was that they are going to do serology, and they're going to present an analysis on the serological conversion of those vaccinated with the placebo and the vaccine, and they're going to know if there was more asymptomatic infection in the placebo than the vaccine, but they haven't really done that. They're probably running the test right now to be able to publish or communicate that information. So that's all we know. But you're right. Pfizer has not really revealed how the ability of the vaccine to prevent infection. Moderna, very limited information, 14 against 38 from 13,000 people who received the vaccine or the placebo approximately. So my personal take is that there is going to be some effect in viral infection. We just have to really look at more data to see how much and how significant is going to be that reducing the pandemic or the really the in a population-based situation.
Thank you, Nestor. I mean, if you think about any of the other, if you think about polio or measles or mumps or any kind of large vaccination programs, the thinking is that you're probably not going to be able to transmit the disease once you're fully vaccinated. But I guess the truth will be in huge, large scale vaccinations and see what happens. Is that right? Okay. And I just wanted to let you know, I wanted to introduce, we have folks on today from Peru and Nigeria, and welcome to you all. So I think we answered Doña Orgaron's questions about the mutation from Britain. Nestor Sosa did. And we have a question from Rick Foster. Rick, would you like to unmute and ask your question about the neutralizing antibodies?
Yeah, thank you. Two brief ones. How does the neutralizing antibody, which is the one that is going to cure you, relate to the IgG antibody that we test for? And is there an update on how long that post-infection immunity may be conferred?
Yeah, I can answer. There have been a few studies in which they actually determine IgG antibodies, so general antibodies against anything, any part of the virus, versus a specific neutralizing antibody, which are usually directed against the spike protein. And there is a correlation, and Carissa can also help me. There is a correlation. So when a person develops general antibodies, within those antibodies, there's a subpopulation of really effective neutralizing antibodies. So there's a general correlation. So it suggests the question that there is correlation. The second part of the question, the duration, we still don't know. I mean, the latest study, earlier studies show that there was a decline in the antibody production, but I think the feeling of the experts now, based on the latest publication, is that the half-life of those antibodies is pretty long. We're talking 160 days half-life, so it's going to last much longer to decrease. And also, we are encouraged by the fact that the immune system has these memory cells, both memory T cells and memory B cells, that although they may not be producing antibodies or actively circulating in the blood, they're hiding in the lymph nodes, waiting for the virus to enter. And once you get exposed to the virus, the reaction kicks in. There's like a mnemonic or memory reaction with newer antibody production and also T cell response. So the hope is that at least for a good several months, we're going to have protection. We don't know further than that because there's no really long-term studies. The virus have been around only for less than a year or a bit over a year. So we don't know, but at least from the kinetics of the curve of antibody, the slope is really very slow. So you can make that there. It's going to last for a few months, hopefully enough to control the pandemic.
Yeah, just an FYI, I actually had COVID and I had 2 ELISA tests. One in May was 3.69, and I just had one 2 weeks ago. It was 3.64. So that's 7 months. That's pretty good.
You're hanging in there. Good.
Yeah.
That's good. That's very good.
Thank you so much, Rick. Seems like you're doing well. Yeah. Thank you for the great question, Rick. Carissa, did you want to add to anything that Nestor said?
No, Nestor hit it right on the head. We had a study that we conducted at our facility among a very small study, about 35 patients that had a positive antibody test, and looked at the presence of neutralizing antibodies in those patients with a collaborator from the university, and found that neutralizing antibodies were detected in a good number of the population. I think about 70% of the people that had antibodies, we detected neutralizing antibodies in. And there was a good correlation between the signal to cutoff ratio that's generated by the antibody IgG screen compared to the neutralizing antibody titers.
Thanks, Carissa. Thanks, Rick, for the great question. Jeffrey Miller had a question that I think early on in the epidemic we talked about quite a bit, which was ivermectin. And just wanted to ask you, Nestor, have you seen any recent articles on the benefits of ivermectin or not so much in recent literature?
Right. Yeah, there was a publication, a retrospective study from Florida, in which they found some benefits of ivermectin in hospitalized patients. But this was really early in the pandemic. People were getting azithromycin, hydroxychloroquine. It was really not a very pristine, methodologically speaking, pristine trial. There was also a study from Bangladesh, and more recently, and this is completely off the record, investigators in Colombia actually told me that they completed a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled study with over 400 subjects, and they found no benefits in early COVID. So I think there's a mixed bag. We haven't really seen any conclusive evidence in favor or against, but most of the societies like IDSA, NIH are not incorporating ivermectin based on what is available. So I think we need to wait for the publication of the studies. But talking to these Colombian colleagues, my bias is that it's not going to be a miracle cure. It's they did a very well-designed study and showed no benefit early on. So it's unfortunate, but I think that's the way it's going to be.
Thank you, Nestor. I think we can plan not to use ivermectin anytime soon right now. Thanks for the great question, though. And then we had some questions from Donna Orgaron and John Foster earlier when you were talking, Nestor, about what was going on with that mutation in the UK. Is it really due to that gene mutation, or could there have been one or two super spreader events that might have caused kind of the outbreak? And then Trevor Hawkins asked, could there be a fitness cost to the mutations that would make the virus less virulent? That kind of a different kind of question. So wanted to get your take on those.
Yeah, those are a great question. I don't think we have the answer for all of them. I mean, we can sort of analyze the situation. Obviously, it doesn't seem to affect the fitness because it's going up. If you look at the frequency, it's becoming more prevalent in some areas in the UK. So at least it doesn't look like it's it's a weak virus or a virus that is not able to infect humans. why it occur, we don't really know. I mean, I've reviewed 3 articles on the weekend on this thing, and people think that it may be the pressure of using convalescent plasma in some cases. That there is a similar strain isolated in South Africa, and we have seen a virus evolution within a person, within a patient, especially immunosuppressed. You give them plasma, and the virus keep changing or mutating. Like we used to see this with HIV all the time, that you put patients on therapy, monotherapy, B therapy, and the virus just keeps evolving more and more resistant. So something similar may have occurred with some of these viruses. The more they interact with the human immune system, the more mutation they accumulate, and some of those mutations help them fare better. So that's what we know. We still have, there's a lot of experiments and verification that they need to do to answer these questions. One question that I saw about this same subject, so I'm going to just ask it, and Carissa can help me. They, in one of the publications, one of the lay press publications, they mentioned that because this affects the spike protein, it may affect the sensitivity of the PCR, especially if you are doing PCR tests of that section of the genome. So it could happen. So I don't know, Carissa, have you heard anything? And do you think it's that possible? Because that's a concern. They're asking, like, then we're not going to be able to detect if we use just a PCR that detects just the mRNA the RNA for spike protein.
Yeah, so actually the majority, we went back and looked at our assays, our PCR assays, actually when the vaccine came out, just to check to see if there would be any cross-reactivity between the vaccine and any of our assays. And we know the vaccine also targets spike. There's only one assay that we use in our laboratory, and spike tends to be a less common target for PCR testing. So we only have one assay that we're using in our laboratory that targets spike. Many of the others target the ORF1A and B, or the N proteins. And so it's less frequently recovered. But in our lab, we are doing collaborations, and many people are doing this across the country, collaborations with individuals who are doing sequencing of the virus to be able to identify common mutations. And there's some databases that have the manufacturer primers and probes aligned with mutations that are being observed around the world to be able to see this proactively. And so right now, the mutation that's been observed is not aligning with any of the molecular assays, most likely because spike is not commonly targeted.
Thank you.
Great. This is Joanna again. There's been a number of questions about kind of vaccines for healthcare workers that might work not in hospitals, but in kind of more solo or small practices. Not so getting the vaccine for themselves, but also how they can start looking to kind of access the vaccine for their patients. And I'm wondering if maybe Marla might be able to start to speak on that, perhaps, if she might have kind of answers to that now that we have both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine.
Sure, I can let you know what the plans are that are underway. So New Mexico published our draft vaccine plan actually on our cv.nmhealth.org website. So if you've not taken a look at that, there's a short kind of executive summary, and then the longer plan kind of lays out what New Mexico's plans are for prioritization of different groups. And, for this very first tier where vaccine supply is very limited, targeting obviously those frontline healthcare workers, primarily in hospitals who are taking care of hospitalized patients, and then people in long-term care settings, as we discussed. Then as more vaccine supply becomes available in the next few weeks, then we're looking at moving down into sort of from tier 1A to tier 1B, which looks at, other healthcare workers and people in other congregate settings as being a priority group. and then expanding from there, week from week. So the goal is, of course, to get as many people vaccinated as possible, as quickly as possible. Part of that just depends on how much vaccine is coming into the state, and it's not, really in our control. We get an allocation each week from the federal government, and we don't know until right before it happens how much we'll be getting. And so those decisions about priority distribution have to be made as we get that information week to week. However, the way to get plugged into vaccine availability is through our immunization program. And so I think this week in CIS, the New Mexico Vaccine Registry, if you're a vaccine provider with the state of New Mexico, there was new features in CIS to be able to start kind of pre-ordering vaccine. So looking at how many healthcare workers you have in your facility, who is at high risk, who would you prioritize, if you had vaccine available. So starting to gather that information more widespread from, all private practices, physicians' offices, hospitals, other healthcare settings. So trying to really anticipate what that need will be for rolling that out. And so log into your CIS portal and look for that, those new features to be available where you can start to communicate what your vaccine needs are going to be. If you're not already a vaccine provider with the state of New Mexico, reach out to our vaccine program. And there's a dedicated email address for that. And it's covid.vaccines@state.nm.us. So you can reach out to the program directly using that email address and get some more information about how to get plugged into vaccine distribution if you're not already participating in the statewide program. And then as more vaccine becomes available, especially the Mrna vaccine, which is easier to distribute, what we hope to see is that you'll be able to get vaccine through a provider like Walgreens or CVS, a pharmacy provider, the way you do now, for your flu shot or your tetanus shot, that sort of thing. So like I said, the goal is to make sure as many people are getting vaccinated as quickly as possible, but it's really just the constraint on supply that's going to dictate sort of how that rolls out. And the public health offices will also be involved in vaccine distribution. So as we start to move to the next priority groups and looking at people like EMS and other first responders, the public health offices throughout the regions will be taking a lead role in helping distribute vaccine to those groups as well. And so that's another option is connecting with your local public health office, especially if you're in one of the more rural areas of New Mexico, to talk to them about availability of vaccine clinics when they think that will be happening and how to make sure that when it's going to happen so you can be plugged into those resources.
Marla, outstanding. Thank you so much for that update. I think you answered literally about 8 questions there, and I think many more that people did not check but were thinking in their mind. Do you mind just chatting to? Do you mind just typing in the chat that email or website if you are not hooked into vaccinations? The address that you could.
Yeah, I will do that. And I see there's another question about adverse event reporting.
Right.
So I'll just touch on that quickly. So there's, VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System by FDA, which will be very important for monitoring adverse reactions. There's also a new web app for people who get the vaccine. So it is based on your smartphone. It's called vSafe. It's optional, but people can opt into it, and it's sort of a real-time surveillance system for adverse events. So you'll get your first message about your vaccine experience, how you're feeling after having the vaccine within 2 hours of receiving it, and then daily thereafter, and you'll be monitored for several weeks. So those will be 2 primary sources for tracking those adverse events, and then also again through the vaccine program at Department of Health.
Thanks, Marla. Marla, I know the CDC, shortly after their criteria for how they were going to vaccinate the U.S. population came out, meaning the frontline healthcare providers and the nursing home, people in nursing home and congregate settings second. They then added another kind of category whereby elderly and fair individuals who are living in multifamily housing, whereby they're younger, their kids and grandkids who are taking care of them, who might be at risk for giving their elderly family members COVID, would qualify under kind of that nursing home category. Is New Mexico going to stick with that same criteria?
Yeah, if you look at the draft plan we submitted, it was sort of high risk folks, with underlying health conditions, or people who were elderly but not living in sort of institutional settings, were in that sort of late phase 1B tier, phase 1B moving into phase 1C. I think it's tricky, right? How do you identify those people? And I think that's where the healthcare providers who are seeing people in private practice are going to be important with helping identify those folks and making sure they get plugged into that, whether it's through a pharmacy, through the health department, or in their own office. So I think that's primarily how we'll be able to identify those folks. But yeah, it's a question, and the same question has come up about people who, work in not necessarily in healthcare, but other essential industries, right? Because that's another group that's been talked about as being prioritized. And so how will you identify those people and make sure that they really get appropriately placed in line? So I think that's one of those things that's going to be sort of challenging to make sure we're getting to the right people.
Thanks, Marla. Really appreciate it. Just want to get to one or two more questions before I have some closing comments. There was a question about when there might be studies or when we might be able to vaccinate those younger than 16. Nestor, do you know of any studies underway or when that might be done?
No, I just know that, for instance, Pfizer included some patients 12 to 15 in their study, but they didn't analyze that data. They didn't present it. And I know Moderna said that they were going to start studies on younger. So I think 2021, the first half of 2021, would there probably be testing. And I think the knowing that it's safe and effective in adults is going to simplify the work in children. Sometimes they do just correlates of protection. So if children receive the vaccine, a small group, and there's no significant side effect, and they mount an immune response, you don't need to enroll 40,000, 60,000 children in a study. You can do it with somewhat less numbers of subjects based on the data from the adults. But they need to do it, but probably not as difficult as it was the first few studies.
And Joanna, could I just add, for pregnant and lactating women, ACOG has come out with a statement saying that it should be a discussion between the patient and their provider, and that there have been several pregnant patients, people who got pregnant despite everything in the studies, who have done fine so far. So we should not just say no, that they shouldn't get them, because pregnant women are definitely more at risk from COVID.
That's what I understand, is that more pregnant women are taking it than not. So, but that it is a decision that is between with the OBGYN or family medicine doc and their patient. Thanks, Leslie, really important. And there's one more question about the vaccines given to prisoners and those in other congregate settings. Marla, can you answer that?
Yeah, my understanding, based again upon our draft vaccine plan, was that people living in other high-risk congregate settings were going to be in the next group, so sort of the phase 1B.
Thank you, Marla. Well, wanted to remind everybody that all the sets of slides are in the chat, so please look for them, as is your CME link is in the chat. Actually, again, it was in the chat at 45 minutes after the hour, and Kent Noseworthy, our digital librarian, just put it in the chat now, the CME link. Even if you do not need CME, and if you have a few extra minutes, please fill it out. Dr. Tomady, who is leading the focus groups, wants to thank you if you've been able to participate in them, and Nestor and Carla and I and Leslie also want to thank you very, very much. Wanted to remind you all that we will follow up the first Monday in January. We won't be meeting next week. Our other programs this week, the first responder and critical care, are not going to be held. We're kind of off the rest of the week. And then I also wanted to just let you know that we're starting a climate change and human health echo mid-February. We have speakers from NOAA, from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, from the National Institute of Environmental Sciences, from the CDC, from the Yale Climate Change Center, many speakers all over the country speaking 8 consecutive weeks from mid-February to mid-April on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. I'll give you more information after the first of the year, but mainly just wanted to thank you all for participating and being our colleagues, and have a wonderful and safe and restful and happy new year. Thank you.